They were told American soldiers would use them, discard them, treat them as spoils of war. But when 22-year-old Ingrid Miller stood before her father in the ruins of Hamburg in 1947, an American sergeant beside her, she couldn't stop crying. Not from shame, but from something she'd never expected to feel toward the enemy: love. The man in uniform, Private James Crawford from Nebraska, held a small velvet box and spoke broken German. "Sir, I want to marry your daughter." What followed was not the story Germany expected. It was something far more complicated. If stories like this move you, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. These forgotten love stories from history deserve to be remembered. The train pulled into Camp Como, Mississippi, on a humid August morning in 1945. The air was thick and still, the kind of heat that made breathing feel like work. Ingrid pressed her face against the window, watching rows of white barracks appear through the dust kicked up by the locomotive. Guard towers stood at corners, rifles visible in the sun. American flags hung limp in the windless morning. She was one of 180 German women being transported to this camp. Former Wehrmacht auxiliaries, nurses, communications operators, office workers. Their uniforms were stained and threadbare after months of retreat, capture, and transfer. Some were barely 20. Others had gray streaking their hair from stress and fear. The train hissed to a stop. A conductor opened the doors and the Mississippi heat rolled in like a wave. Ingrid grabbed her small canvas bag. Everything she owned fit inside. A photograph of her family, a comb, a rosary her mother had pressed into her hands before the war swallowed everything. Outside, American soldiers waited. Not the monsters from propaganda posters, but young men in olive uniforms, some chewing gum, others smoking cigarettes. They looked bored, not cruel. Officers with clipboards stood near trucks that would carry the women to the camp gates. The first thing Ingrid noticed was the smell. Not the stench of unwashed bodies and diesel fuel she'd grown used to, but something clean. Pine trees mixed with freshly cut grass and something cooking in the distance. Bacon, maybe. Real food. The sounds were different, too. English commands, yes, but spoken casually, almost lazily. A southern accent drawled instructions she couldn't understand. Someone laughed. A radio played music from a nearby building. Jazz, bright and alive. So different from the martial music she'd known. Visually, the camp overwhelmed her. It was orderly, but not oppressive. White buildings gleamed in the sun. Paths were swept clean. Gardens with actual flowers grew near some of the barracks. The fence was there, yes, but it didn't feel like a prison. It felt like something else entirely. The physical sensation came last, her legs trembling as she stepped down from the train. Her throat was dry. Her dress stuck to her back with sweat. But beneath the fear was something unexpected, a tiny spark of relief. They had survived. Whatever came next, they had survived. Ingrid stood with the other women as names were called and checked off lists. Her heart pounded. Around her, others reacted differently. Some wept quietly. One older woman stood rigid, jaw set, refusing to show weakness. A girl from Berlin whispered prayers under her breath. When Ingrid's name was called, Müller, Ingrid. She stepped forward. An American soldier, young with red hair, nodded and marked her name. No shouting, no rough hands, just bureaucratic efficiency. She was handed a numbered tag and directed to a truck. As she climbed up, her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped her bag. The woman beside her caught it, pressed it back into her hands. Their eyes met, sharing the same confusion. Where was the cruelty they'd been promised? Wait. The fear was real, but something didn't match what they'd been told. As the trucks rolled through the camp gates, Ingrid saw American soldiers playing baseball in a field. She saw laundry hanging on lines. She saw normalcy. And that scared her more than any threat could have. The truck stopped outside a long building. Steam rose from vents along its roof. Ingrid's stomach clenched. This was it, the moment they'd strip them, humiliate them, break them down. Inside the building, female American nurses waited. Not guards with weapons, but women in clean white uniforms, hair pinned back, faces neutral but not hostile. One spoke German with a thick accent. "You will shower. We check for lice. You receive clean clothes. Any questions?" Questions? Ingrid had 1,000, but her voice wouldn't work. She followed the others into the tiled room. The nurses were efficient, but not cruel. They checked hair, looked in mouths, examined skin for disease. Clinical, professional, almost kind. Then came the showers. Ingrid stood under the faucet, turned the handle, and hot water poured down. Actually hot. Steam rose around her. For months she'd washed in cold streams, or not at all. This heat soaked into her skin, her muscles, her bones. She stood there, water running over her face, and something broke inside her. She began to cry, not from fear, but from the shock of being treated like a human being. The soap came next, white bars that smelled like lavender. Not the harsh lye they'd used in Germany, but real soap. Soft, gentle. She lathered it in her hands, watching white foam appear, and the scent surrounded her like a memory from before the war. Other women cried too. Some laughed nervously. One sang softly, an old German folk song that made everyone fall silent. They scrubbed away months of dirt, fear, and exhaustion, watching it all spiral down the drains. Clean clothes followed, simple cotton dresses, gray but freshly pressed. Clean underwear, towels that were thick and soft. Ingrid dried her hair and looked at herself in a mirror. Her face was gaunt but clean. Her eyes looked different, still frightened but also confused. The enemy was supposed to break them. Instead, they were being restored. That first night, she lay in her bunk and wrote in a small notebook she'd managed to keep. August 15th, 1945. We arrived today. They gave us hot water, soap, clean clothes. I don't understand. This is not what we were told. What kind of enemy treats prisoners like this? The next morning, a bell woke them at 6. The women dressed and filed out of the barracks, following signs painted in German. Mess hall. Inside, long tables waited, and the smell hit Ingrid like a physical force. Coffee. Real coffee, not the chicory substitute they'd drunk for years. Bacon frying, bread baking. Her stomach cramped with hunger so intense it hurt. They lined up at a counter. American cooks, men in white aprons, served food onto metal trays. Ingrid watched the woman in front of her receive scrambled eggs, 2 strips of bacon, toast with butter, and a cup of coffee. When it was her turn, she held out her tray with shaking hands. The cook spooned eggs onto her plate. He was older, with gray hair and kind eyes. He added bacon, then toast, then filled her coffee cup. He smiled slightly, not mockingly, but warmly, and said something in English she didn't understand. But the tone was clear. Eat. You're safe here. Ingrid sat at a table, staring at the food. Actual eggs. The bacon was crispy and smelled like heaven. The toast was white bread, not the black sawdust bread of Germany's final years, but soft white bread with yellow butter melting into it. She picked up her fork. Her hand trembled. She took a small bite of egg. The taste exploded in her mouth. Rich, salty, warm. She chewed slowly, tears running down her face. Around her, other women were experiencing the same shock. Some ate quickly, afraid the food would disappear. Others ate slowly, savoring every bite. A few couldn't eat at all, their stomachs too shrunken to accept abundance. Ingrid bit into the bacon. Fat and salt and protein her body desperately needed. She spread butter on the toast and tasted sweetness mixed with cream. The coffee was hot and bitter and perfect. Across the table, a woman from Stuttgart whispered, "My children are eating grass soup, and I'm here eating bacon." The guilt hit Ingrid then. While her family starved in the ruins of Hamburg, her father sick, her mother scavenging for food, her young brother barely alive, she sat in an American camp eating more food than she'd seen in months. The contradiction was unbearable. But her body didn't care about contradictions. Her body ate. Her stomach accepted the food gratefully. Her strength began to return with every bite, and that made the guilt worse. A guard walked past, young, maybe 25, with dark hair and a gentle face. He nodded at the women as he passed, his expression neutral but not hostile. Ingrid watched him go, confused by his casualness. Where was the hatred? Where was the cruelty? After breakfast, they were allowed to take second cups of coffee. Ingrid stood in line again, feeling stronger already, and noticed other things. American soldiers laughing with each other, a radio playing music, sunlight streaming through windows. Life continuing normally while her world had ended. She took her coffee back to the table and sat, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. A woman beside her spoke softly in German. "Do you think this is a trick? To fatten us up before whatever comes next?" Ingrid didn't answer. She didn't know. All she knew was that the enemy fed them like human beings, and that was harder to process than any cruelty would have been. After breakfast, they were shown their permanent barracks. The building was clean, painted white inside, with rows of beds along each wall. Each woman received a bunk, a thin mattress, 2 blankets, and a small footlocker for personal belongings. Ingrid chose a lower bunk near a window. She made the bed carefully, tucking the corners the way she'd been taught in training. The blankets were wool, thick and warm. The mattress was stuffed with something soft, not straw, but actual cotton or kapok. She sat on it, testing, and it gave under her weight. Comfortable, almost luxurious compared to what she'd known. The barracks were heated. Small radiators stood beneath the windows, promising warmth when winter came. Ingrid touched one, feeling residual heat. In Germany, her family huddled in a basement with no heat, burning furniture scraps for warmth. Here the enemy provided radiators. Small possessions were allowed. The guards explained in broken German that they could keep photographs, letters, books, personal items, as long as nothing was dangerous. Ingrid unpacked her canvas bag. The photograph of her family went on the small shelf above her bunk. Her comb, her rosary, a worn copy of Goethe poems her mother had given her. These few items made the space hers. Letters would be permitted, they learned. They could write home once a week. Paper and pencils would be provided. Ingrid's hand went to her pocket where she kept her mother's last letter, received just before capture. "Ingrid, we pray for you. Hamburg is ashes. Your brother grows weaker. Be strong. Survive. Come home to us. That night, as darkness fell over the camp, Ingrid lay in her bunk listening to the sounds of Mississippi. Cicadas singing, a train whistle in the distance, guards' voices speaking English. Inside the barracks, women whispered to each other, sharing fears and confusion. Why are they treating us this way? It must be for propaganda, to show the world they're civilized. Or maybe they're just different from what we were told. Ingrid pulled the blanket up to her chin. It smelled clean, like the soap they'd been given. She closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come easily. Her mind kept circling the same question. If the enemy could show this much humanity, what did that say about the side she'd fought for? The days settled into a rhythm that Ingrid found both comforting and disturbing. The morning bell rang at 6. They dressed in their work clothes and went to breakfast. Always hot food, always more than enough. Then came roll call, where guards checked names off lists and work assignments were given. Ingrid was assigned to the camp library. She would help organize donated books, assist other prisoners who wanted to read, and keep the reading room clean. The work was light, almost pleasant. She spent her days surrounded by books in English and German, sometimes reading when no one needed her help. Other women worked in the kitchens, the laundry, the gardens, or in workshops where they repaired uniforms and equipment. The labor was never harsh. Breaks were regular. Water was provided. Guards supervised but rarely interfered. They were paid for their work, small amounts in camp script that could be used at the canteen. Ingrid received her first payment after a week, $5 in paper script with the camp's stamp on it. She stared at the money, not quite believing it. Prisoners being paid for their labor? The canteen amazed her most. Inside a small building near the center of camp, shelves held goods that seemed impossible. Hershey chocolate bars, Coca-Cola in glass bottles, cigarettes, soap, toothpaste, combs, writing paper, pencils, even cosmetics, lipstick, powder, perfume. Ingrid's first purchase was chocolate. She held the brown wrap bar in her hands, feeling its weight, smelling the cocoa through the paper. She broke off a square and placed it on her tongue. The sweetness was overwhelming, almost painful. She hadn't tasted chocolate since before the war. She let it melt slowly, eyes closed, remembering birthday parties and Christmas mornings and her mother's smile. Meals became routine, but never ceased to amaze. Lunch brought sandwiches, thick slices of ham or cheese between soft bread. Dinner offered meat, vegetables, potatoes, always plenty. The women began gaining weight. Ingrid noticed her dresses fitting tighter, her face filling out, her strength returning. Evenings were their own. Some women gathered to sing German folk songs, their voices soft and melancholy. Others wrote letters home, though replies came slowly, if at all. The camp had a small library where Ingrid spent most free evenings, reading everything she could, American novels, magazines, newspapers, learning about the world outside through enemy words. On Sundays, church services were held. A Catholic chaplain came to say Mass, and a Protestant minister led services for those who wanted them. Ingrid attended Mass, kneeling in the small chapel, praying in German while the chaplain spoke in English. The familiar rituals comforted her, even as she prayed for her enemies' souls. The paradox gnawed at her constantly. This comfort, this safety, this abundance, all provided by the enemy while her family suffered. Letters from home arrived occasionally, each one, describing worsening conditions. No food, no heat, disease spreading, death becoming common. Her mother's letters tried to be cheerful, but the desperation bled through every word. We are managing, my dear. Your father's cough has worsened, but we hope for the best. Your brother found work clearing rubble for extra rations. We think of you always. God willing, you will return when this madness ends. Ingrid read these letters, sitting in a heated barracks, her stomach full, her body clean, her safety assured. The guilt was crushing. She wanted to send food, medicine, money, but that was forbidden. She could only send letters back, carefully worded to pass censors, trying to reassure her mother without revealing how well she was being treated. The contradiction became her daily companion. Every meal, every warm shower, every comfortable night's sleep came with the weight of knowing her family had none of these things. The enemy's kindness wasn't a gift. It was a burden that grew heavier with each passing day. 3 months into captivity, Ingrid stood before a mirror in the barracks bathroom and barely recognized herself. Her face had filled out. Color had returned to her cheeks. Her hair, once dull and lifeless, now shone. She looked healthy. Almost beautiful again, the way she'd looked before the war consumed everything. She thought of her mother's last photograph, sent 6 months ago. A gaunt face, hollow eyes, gray skin stretched over bones. They were living in the same world, but inhabiting different realities. Letters continued arriving, each one harder to read than the last. Her father's tuberculosis had worsened. Medicine was impossible to find. Her brother, only 15, worked 16-hour days clearing rubble for a handful of rations. Neighbors were dying, not from violence, but from hunger, cold, disease. The slow grinding death of a defeated nation. Meanwhile, Ingrid ate 3 meals a day. She gained 15 pounds in 3 months. She slept under warm blankets. She bought chocolate at the canteen and felt guilty for enjoying it. She read books and listened to music and wore clean clothes and existed in a strange bubble where the war felt distant and unreal. The American Guard's casual attitude toward abundance shocked her constantly. They complained about the camp food being boring or bland. They threw away leftovers that could have fed her family for days. They took hot showers for granted, wasted soap, left lights burning unnecessarily. To them, these weren't luxuries. They were normal. She watched them, these young men who were her captors and somehow not her enemies. They talked about baseball games and movie stars and girlfriends back home. They listened to jazz music and danced at weekend gatherings. They seemed to carry no weight, no guilt, no sense of the devastation their victory had caused. But then she remembered they hadn't caused it. Germany had. Her nation had started this war, had bombed other countries, had committed atrocities she was only beginning to hear about through whispered conversations. The Americans had simply won. And this abundance, this casual prosperity, was what winning looked like. One guard told her through halting German that his family in Nebraska struggled during the Depression. They'd been poor, hungry, desperate. But America had recovered. It had fed its people, employed them, given them hope. And now it fed even its enemies prisoners. The physical transformation of the women was undeniable. After 6 months, they looked like different people. Healthy, clean, even happy at times. Guards commented on it. One officer wrote in a report that Ingrid later saw, "The German women prisoners are in better health than many civilians in the rural South. This is both humanitarian triumph and cruel irony." Ingrid thought often about that phrase, cruel irony. Yes, that captured it perfectly. To be saved by the enemy. To be fed while your family starves. To find humanity in the last place you expected it. To realize that your nation's greatest lie wasn't about the enemy's cruelty, but about their decency. The guilt evolved into something more complex. She was grateful to be alive, to be safe, to be treated well, but that gratitude felt like betrayal. How could she be thankful to the enemy? How could she accept their kindness without feeling like she was abandoning her family, her nation, everything she'd believed in? At night, lying in her warm bunk, she wrestled with these questions. The other women did too. Some grew bitter, insisting the Americans' kindness was manipulation. Others adapted quickly, accepting their new reality with relief. A few, like Ingrid, existed in between. Grateful but guilty, comfortable but conflicted, alive but not sure what that life meant anymore. Memory collided with reality daily, and reality with its hot meals and warm blankets and unexpected humanity kept winning. The first time Ingrid really saw him was in October, 2 months after arrival. She was in the library shelving books when a guard walked in. She'd seen him before. Most guards rotated through different areas, but never paid much attention. He was average height, dark-haired, maybe 24 or 25. This time he approached the desk where she worked. "Excuse me," he said in English. "Do you speak English?" "A little," Ingrid replied carefully. She'd been learning, picking up words and phrases from other prisoners who knew more. He held up a German-English dictionary. "I'm trying to learn German. Can you help me with pronunciation?" Ingrid was stunned. An American guard wanted to learn German? Why? He saw her confusion and smiled, a gentle, genuine smile. "I figure if I'm supposed to guard German prisoners, I should be able to talk to them. Seems only fair." His name was James Crawford, he told her. Called Jim by his friends. From Nebraska. He'd been drafted at 20, sent to Europe too late to see real combat, and now stationed here until his discharge. He was studying to be a teacher when the war interrupted. Over the following weeks, he returned to the library regularly. Sometimes he checked out books. Sometimes he asked Ingrid to help him with German words. She corrected his pronunciation, taught him simple phrases, and slowly they began having actual conversations, half English, half German, full of gestures and laughter when words failed. He told her about Nebraska, flat fields of wheat, small towns where everyone knew everyone, winter snow that stretched forever. She told him about Hamburg, the harbor, the music halls, the way the city smelled like salt and fish and commerce. Before the bombs came, he never asked about the war directly, never questioned her role or her beliefs. He treated her like a person, not a prisoner or an enemy. That was revolutionary. Other small moments accumulated. A guard named Tommy shared his cigarettes with the women during work breaks, lighting them with his own matches and making jokes in broken German. A sergeant named Williams brought his harmonica one evening and played folk songs while prisoners and guards sat together in the courtyard, music bridging the language gap. An older guard, O'Brien, showed Ingrid pictures of his 3 daughters. "This one's studying to be a nurse," he said proudly, pointing to a photo of a girl about Ingrid's age. "She wants to help people, no matter where they're from." The message was clear. You could have been my daughter. You are someone's daughter. This war put us on opposite sides, but we're not so different. Not all interactions were kind. Some guards carried visible resentment. They'd lost brothers in Europe, friends in the Pacific. They looked at German prisoners and saw the enemy who'd killed people they loved. Ingrid understood that. She'd lost people too. How could she judge their grief? But even the hostile guards didn't abuse them. They maintained professional distance, kept interactions minimal, but never crossed lines. The worst they did was ignore the prisoners, treat them as invisible. Compared to what Ingrid had feared, invisibility was nothing. The human moment that changed everything came in late November. Jim brought Ingrid a book, The Grapes of Wrath by Steinbeck. This is about Americans struggling, he said. During the Depression. We weren't always prosperous. We know what suffering is. Ingrid read it over 2 weeks. The story of the Jode family, starving and desperate, searching for work and dignity, moved her deeply. She saw parallels to Germany's current state. When she finished, she found Jim in the library. "Thank you for this," she said in careful English. "It helps me understand." America suffered too. Maybe suffering is universal? Jim nodded. "That's what I wanted you to see. We're all just people. Wars make us enemies, but underneath we're the same. We all want food, safety, love, a chance at a decent life." His eyes met hers and something shifted. Not attraction, not yet. Just recognition. They saw each other as human beings first and everything else second. That moment would change both their lives forever. Ingrid's world was fragmenting. She could feel it happening, piece by piece. Every assumption she'd held cracking apart and revealing something different underneath. She'd been raised on certain truths. Germany was great. Germans were superior. The Führer knew best. Their cause was righteous. The enemy was barbaric. These weren't just beliefs. They were the foundation of her reality. But now? Now she ate food provided by barbarians. She slept in beds prepared by savages. She was treated with dignity by monsters. Every day reality contradicted everything she'd been taught. At night she lay awake wrestling with the contradictions. Part of her still wanted to believe the propaganda. Loyalty demanded it. Her father had believed. Her brothers had fought. Friends had died. To accept that it was all a lie meant accepting that every sacrifice had been meaningless. But another part of her, growing stronger daily, couldn't deny what she experienced. The Americans weren't cruel. They were casual, friendly, sometimes even kind. They followed rules, maintained order, showed mercy. They embodied the civilization Germany had claimed to be defending. The shame of this realization was crushing. She'd typed orders for the Wehrmacht. She'd believed the reports, the speeches, the promises. She'd trusted her nation's leaders even as they led Germany to destruction. How could she have been so blind? But more painful was the question, what now? If everything she'd believed was false, what did she believe instead? Who was she without those foundations? She found herself avoiding mirrors, not because she looked bad, she looked healthier than she had in years, but because she didn't recognize the person looking back. That person was being fed by the enemy and was grateful. That person was learning English and enjoying it. That person was developing feelings for an American guard. That person felt like a traitor. Her internal dialogue became a constant battle. I'm a loyal German. But what does that loyalty mean if Germany was wrong? My father believed. Your father was lied to, just like you. Our cause was just. Was starting a war that killed millions just? The Americans are the enemy. The enemy who feeds you, heals you, treats you with dignity? She wrote in her notebook, pages and pages of confused thoughts. December 3rd, 1945. I am losing myself. The girl who arrived here doesn't exist anymore. I don't know who I'm becoming. All I know is that the enemy has shown me more humanity than my own nation did in its final years, and I don't know what to do with that truth. The guilt remained constant. While she struggled with existential questions, her family struggled to survive. Letters from home grew more desperate. Her father was dying. Her brother was skin and bones. Her mother wrote begging for any help, any hope. Ingrid wanted to send everything, money, food, medicine, but that was forbidden. All she could do was send letters full of empty reassurances and meaningless comfort. Stay strong, this will pass. I love you. Words that changed nothing. The worst part was knowing she was safe while they suffered. She had food while they starved. She had heat while they froze. She had hope while they had none. And that safety came from the enemy's mercy. How did you reconcile that? How did you accept that the very people you'd been taught to hate were the ones keeping you alive? How did you hold on to loyalty when loyalty demanded denying reality? Ingrid had no answers. She only had questions that grew more painful every day. And slowly, reluctantly, she began to accept that maybe some questions didn't have comfortable answers. Maybe the truth was just messy and complicated and painful. Maybe the greatest lie she'd been told wasn't about the enemy's cruelty. Maybe it was about the simplicity of good and evil, right and wrong, us and them. Maybe the world was more complicated than propaganda ever admitted. The women in the barracks became a chorus of conflicting voices, each processing captivity differently. Greta, a former officer's secretary from Berlin, remained defiant. "This is psychological warfare," she insisted during nighttime discussions. "They feed us to make us weak, to make us forget who we are. We must resist. We must remember Germany's greatness." "What greatness?" Maria shot back. She was younger, angrier, more willing to speak the unspeakable. "Germany is rubble. Our families starve. We lost. And these Americans who won? They're treating us better than our own leaders ever did." The barracks fell silent. Such words bordered on treason, or would have, back home. Here, in the strange liminal space of captivity, the women could voice doubts they'd never dared speak before. Older women, those who remembered the chaos after the First War, clung more tightly to the beliefs that had given their suffering meaning. They'd lived through hunger and humiliation before. The Nazi promises had lifted them up, given them pride, made them feel strong again. To admit those promises were lies meant admitting they'd been fools twice. Younger women adapted faster. They had less invested in ideology. For them, the war had always been present, the propaganda always background noise. They were more pragmatic. Food was food. Safety was safety. They took what they could get and worried less about what it meant. The educated women wrestled most. Teachers, nurses, secretaries who'd been raised to think critically found themselves unable to ignore contradictions. They'd been taught that Germans were disciplined, organized, civilized, but the Americans were more organized. Their camp ran more smoothly than any German installation Ingrid had seen. Class divisions emerged too. Women from wealthy families who'd enjoyed privilege under the Reich struggled to accept that America's working-class guards had more dignity than Germany's elite ever showed. Factory workers and farm girls, who'd always been told to serve their betters, found it easier to accept that maybe the whole hierarchy had been a lie. Late-night conversations grew more honest as months passed. "Do you think we were evil?" someone asked one night. Silence. Then, "We weren't evil, but the men we served were." "Does that make us innocent?" "No, but maybe it makes us human. We believed what we were told. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains it." Ingrid listened to these debates, sometimes participating, often just absorbing. She heard pain in every voice, the pain of belief systems collapsing, of worldviews crumbling, of identity dissolving. Some women wrote letters home trying to warn their families, "Don't believe what they tell you about the Americans. They're not what we thought." But those letters were censored. The truth couldn't go home, not yet. Others found comfort in religious faith. God allowed this, they reasoned. Perhaps to teach us something. Perhaps to save us from something worse. Faith gave them a framework for understanding suffering that ideology couldn't provide. A few women formed a secret group, not resistance, but remembrance. They met quietly to practice German customs, sing German songs, maintain German identity. Not from loyalty to the regime, but from fear of losing themselves completely. If they weren't German anymore, what were they? Ingrid understood that fear, but she also understood that holding on to old identities might mean rejecting new truths, and she wasn't sure she could do that anymore. One night she spoke what many felt. Maybe we're not just German anymore. Maybe we're something else now. Something that exists between worlds. We've seen both sides. We know truths that people at home don't know yet. That's a burden, but maybe it's also a gift. No one answered, but no one disagreed either. They were becoming something new, these women. Not quite German anymore, not American, something in between. And maybe Ingrid thought that in-between space was where the truth actually lived. The true transformation came not from any single revelation, but from accumulated evidence that became impossible to ignore. America's power, Ingrid realized, didn't come from cruelty or oppression. It came from something far more effective: freedom. She saw it in the guards who casually criticized their own government. She heard it in the radio broadcasts where journalists questioned military policies. She read it in newspapers where politicians were mocked, satirized, held accountable. This wasn't chaos. This was confidence. America was so strong it could tolerate dissent. Germany had demanded perfect unity, silenced critics, crushed opposition. And Germany had lost. America allowed argument and disagreement and somehow became more powerful because of it. The concept of individual worth slowly penetrated her understanding. In Germany, individuals had existed to serve the state. Your value came from your usefulness to the collective. But here guards treated prisoners as individuals with inherent dignity, regardless of usefulness. Jim exemplified this. He brought Ingrid books not because she could do anything for him, but because he respected her intelligence. He taught her English not to use her as a translator, but because he believed in education as an inherent good. He treated her with courtesy not because rules required it, but because he thought all people deserved courtesy. This was revolutionary to Ingrid. She'd been taught that kindness was weakness, but Jim's kindness came from strength, the strength of believing in principles larger than himself. The camp's education programs reinforced this. Classes were offered: English language, American history, civics, optional, not forced. The women who attended learned about democracy, voting rights, freedom of speech. concepts that seemed almost mystical. One class showed a film about the American founding. Ingrid watched, fascinated, as the narrator explained how colonists had rebelled against a king, written a constitution, created a government that could be changed peacefully. The very idea seemed impossible. Governments that served people instead of ruling them? Leaders who could be voted out? After the film, a teacher opened discussion. "What questions do you have?" Ingrid raised her hand. "But without a strong leader, how does anything get done? Doesn't freedom create chaos?" The teacher smiled. "That's what many people think. But we found that freedom creates innovation. When people can think freely, question freely, act freely within laws, they accomplish more than any dictator could force them to. Freedom isn't chaos, it's organized creativity." Ingrid thought about this for days. Germany had eliminated freedom in the name of order, but America maintained order while preserving freedom, and America had won. The equation was undeniable. The most dangerous recognition came slowly. Mercy was not weakness. It was the ultimate power move. By treating prisoners according to Geneva Conventions, by feeding them, clothing them, paying them, showing them dignity, America demonstrated it could afford to be humane. It didn't need cruelty to maintain control. It was so overwhelmingly powerful that kindness cost it nothing. This was more devastating than any punishment could have been. It proved America's superiority without saying a word. It made Germany's cruelty look not like strength, but like desperate brutality from a weaker nation. Ingrid understood finally. The greatest weapon wasn't bombs or guns. It was the ability to show mercy to your defeated enemy and make them see that you were right all along. She wrote in her notebook, January 8, 1946, I have learned the most painful truth. Power doesn't come from crushing people. It comes from lifting them. Germany tried to conquer through force and failed. America won through force, but conquers through principles. They don't need to force us to change our minds. By simply treating us as human beings, they prove that their way works better. That's not propaganda. That's demonstration. I can't defend Germany's actions anymore. I can't pretend the ideology was right. I can only acknowledge that we were wrong, accept that truth, and try to become something better. Maybe that's what defeat really means. Not losing a war, but losing the ability to deny truth. And maybe that's not the worst thing. Maybe truth, however painful, is better than comfortable lies. She closed the notebook, feeling lighter. Accepting truth hurt, but pretending lies were true hurt worse, and she was tired of hurting in the wrong ways. It happened on a cold February evening, 6 months into captivity. Ingrid was in the library closing up for the night when Jim walked in. He wasn't on duty, she could tell by his civilian clothes, unusual to see. He looked nervous, holding his cap in his hands, turning it around and around. "Ingrid," he said in German. He'd gotten better at the language. "Can we talk?" She nodded, curious and suddenly nervous herself. They'd become friends over the months, more than friends if she was honest. The way her heart jumped when she saw him, the way she looked for excuses to be where he was, the way his smile made her feel safe. She'd tried to ignore these feelings, but they'd grown anyway. "I'm being discharged," he said. "In 3 months, I'll go back to Nebraska, finish my teaching degree." Ingrid's stomach dropped. She'd known this day would come. Guards rotated out. The war was over. Eventually, everyone went home. But hearing it made it real, and real meant losing him. "I understand," she managed. "Thank you for being kind to us." "That's not what I wanted to say." Jim took a breath. "Ingrid, these past months, getting to know you, you're the smartest, strongest, most interesting person I've ever met. And I know this is crazy. I know we're supposed to be enemies. I know your family's in Germany and mine's in Nebraska. I know 1,000 reasons why this doesn't make sense." He stepped closer. "But when I think about going home, all I can think is that I don't want to go without you. I love you, Ingrid. I've loved you for months. And I know you might not feel the same." "I do." The words escaped before she could stop them. "I love you too." "But Jim, how? My family." "I know. That's why—" He pulled a small box from his pocket. "I want to do this right. I want to ask your father. I want to go to Germany, find your family, and ask permission to marry you. The proper way." Ingrid stared at the box. Inside would be a ring, a proposal, a future she'd never imagined. Tears filled her eyes. "My father. He won't understand. You're American. The enemy. He'll think I've betrayed everything. Then I'll show him I haven't. I'll show him that I respect you, love you, want to take care of you. I'll prove that loving me doesn't mean betraying Germany. It means choosing a different future." Ingrid thought of her father, proud, stubborn, destroyed by Germany's defeat. He would hate this. He would see it as the ultimate humiliation, his daughter marrying an American soldier. But she thought of Jim, kind, patient, decent. He'd shown her what real strength looked like, what real honor was, and she loved him more than she'd thought possible to love someone. The choice was impossible. Stay loyal to a broken past or embrace an uncertain future? Hold on to her father's approval or follow her heart? Remain German or become something new? She looked at Jim's face, earnest, hopeful, vulnerable. He was offering her not just love, but a chance to choose her own path, to stop being defined by what she'd lost and start building what she wanted. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. And yes, we'll ask my father. Even though it terrifies me. Jim's smile was sunrise. He opened the box, a simple ring, not expensive but beautiful. He slipped it onto her finger, and Ingrid watched it glitter in the library's light. This was her turning point. This moment saying yes to love across enemy lines. Saying yes to a future that betrayed the past. Saying yes to truth over loyalty. She was no longer just Ingrid Miller, German prisoner. She was Ingrid who loved Jim. Ingrid who chose differently. Ingrid who would face her father and explain that sometimes love mattered more than nationality. The pain of transformation was physical. Her chest ached, but beneath the pain was something else. Hope. For the first time since the war ended, she felt something other than guilt and confusion. She felt possibility. That night in her bunk, she wrote, February 15th, 1946. Today I became a traitor and the freest I've ever been. I chose love over loyalty, future over past, truth over comfort. My father will hate me. Germany will judge me. But I will marry Jim Crawford, and we will build something new. Maybe that's what healing looks like. Not forgetting the past, but refusing to let it destroy the future. I loved Germany, but Germany is gone. What remains is me and the choice of who I want to become. I choose this. God help me, I choose this. She fell asleep wearing the ring, feeling its weight, feeling changed. The next 3 months passed in a blur of preparation and dread. Jim's discharge came through in May 1946. Ingrid's repatriation was scheduled for June. They would travel to Germany together, him as a civilian now, her as a former prisoner returning home. The plan was simple. Find her family, ask her father's permission, marry if he agreed. But Ingrid's anxiety grew with every passing day. Letters from her mother painted a grim picture. Hamburg was still ruins. Food was scarce. Her father's health had worsened. They were surviving, but barely. Into this devastation, Ingrid would arrive healthy, well-fed, wearing an American's ring. The shame was crushing. While her family had starved, she'd fallen in love. While they'd suffered, she'd been safe. While their world had ended, she'd been planning a future. How could she face them? The other women noticed her distress. Some were supportive. Take happiness where you find it. The war took enough. Others were judgmental. Your father will be destroyed. How can you do this to him? A few were envious. You're escaping. The rest of us go home to nothing. All of it was true. Jim tried to reassure her. Your father will understand. He wants you happy, right? He wants you safe? I can give you both. But Ingrid knew better. Her father didn't just want her happy, he wanted her German. He wanted her loyal to the nation he'd served. He wanted her to reject everything American, not marry it. She packed her few belongings, the dresses from the camp, the books Jim had given her, the notebook full of confused thoughts. She wore the ring on a chain around her neck, hidden under her dress. She would show it only when the time came. The night before departure, she barely slept. Tomorrow she would leave safety and return to ruins. Tomorrow she would face the consequences of her choices. Tomorrow she would learn if love was enough to bridge the chasm war had created. The ship docked in Bremen in early June. Germany was worse than Ingrid remembered. The port was skeletal, twisted metal, bombed buildings, cranes that no longer worked. People moved through the ruins like ghosts, thin and gray, their eyes hollow. Children begged for food. Old women picked through rubble for anything salvageable. Jim held her hand as they navigated the chaos. His American uniform drew stares, some hostile, some desperate, all wary. Ingrid felt the weight of those stares. She was the German girl with the American, traitor, collaborator, whore. The words followed her in whispered German. Trains barely ran, but they found one heading toward Hamburg. The journey took 2 days. Every station was damaged. Every town was rubble. Germany had been broken completely, and the scars would last generations. Hamburg was the worst. Ingrid's beautiful city, her home, was gone. In its place stood a wasteland of shattered buildings and cleared paths through debris. The harbor district where she'd grown up didn't exist anymore, just empty lots where homes had been. She directed Jim to her family's address. The building was gone. Completely gone. Where her apartment had stood was nothing but a crater filled with rubble. Panic seized her. Where was her family? Had they died? Had the letters stopped coming because there was no one left to write? A neighbor, ancient and bent, appeared from a cellar entrance. She recognized Ingrid, her eyes widening. Muller? Ingrid Muller? My God, child, you're alive. My family, where are they? The cellar. They live in the cellar. Go down those steps, third door on the left. Ingrid grabbed Jim's hand and ran. Down concrete steps into darkness. She found the third door and knocked. Her mother opened it. For a moment, neither recognized the other. Then her mother screamed, joy and disbelief and relief, and pulled Ingrid into her arms. You're alive! You're alive! Oh God, you're alive! Ingrid held her mother's skeletal frame and wept. Behind her, Jim stood quietly, waiting, giving them this moment. Inside the cellar, her father sat on a cot, coughing, wrapped in thin blankets. Her brother, 15 now, but looking 12, stared with huge eyes. Father, Ingrid whispered. He looked up, and saw the American standing behind her. Her father's face went through a series of emotions, recognition, joy, confusion, then hardening understanding. Who is this? He asked in German, his voice weak but sharp. Father, this is Jim, James Crawford. He was a guard at the camp where I was held. He's a good man. An American. Not a question, an accusation. Yes. Her father stood slowly, his body shaking with effort and rage. You bring an American to my home? To this? He gestured at the cellar, at their poverty, at the ruins above. Father, please listen. Listen? To what? To my daughter defending the enemy? They destroyed our country, Ingrid. They bombed our city. He broke into coughing, doubling over. Jim stepped forward, but Ingrid stopped him. When her father recovered, Ingrid spoke carefully. Father, I need to tell you something. I love him. He loves me. He wants to marry me. We came here to ask your permission. Silence. Her mother gasped. Her brother stared. Her father's face turned red. Permission? You want my permission to betray Germany? To spit on everything we fought for? Germany lost, Father. The war is over. What we fought for is gone. All that's left is trying to survive and find some happiness in what remains. Jim offers me that. He offers us help if you'll let him. Help? Her father laughed bitterly. American charity? No, I'd rather starve than accept anything from them. But Father, no. He pointed at Jim. Leave. Leave my home. And take her with you if she's chosen you over her family. But don't ask for my blessing. You'll never have it. Ingrid felt her world collapse. She'd known it might go badly, but the reality was worse than imagined. She looked at her mother, pleading silently for support. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Ingrid, then at her husband, then back to Ingrid. When she spoke, her voice trembled. Wilhelm, look at her. Really look at her. She's healthy. She's alive. She survived. If this American man did that, if he kept our daughter safe, then maybe we owe him thanks, not hatred. Anna, you can't be serious. I'm tired of hatred, Wilhelm. Hatred destroyed our country. Hatred took our sons. Hatred left us in this cellar eating scraps. I'm tired. She turned to Ingrid. Do you love him? Yes, Mama. Does he treat you well? Better than I deserve? Then you have my blessing. She walked to Jim, took his hand, and said in broken English, Thank you, for keeping her safe, for loving her, for being good man. Jim's eyes filled with tears. He squeezed her hand. I'll take care of her, I promise. Ingrid's father said nothing. He sat down, turned his face away, and refused to look at any of them. Ingrid and Jim married in a small church in Hamburg 3 weeks later. Her mother attended. Her father did not. They moved to Nebraska to Jim's family farm outside Omaha. His parents welcomed her cautiously at first, but her humility and hard work won them over. She learned English fluently. She taught German at the local high school. She became American, though part of her remained forever German. She sent money home every month. Food packages, clothing, medicine. Her mother wrote grateful letters. Her father never wrote, but her mother said he was softening, that time was healing him slowly. In 1949, her father finally wrote. A short letter, his handwriting shaky. Ingrid, I was wrong to turn you away. Hatred consumed me, and I lost precious time with my daughter. If the American still wants to marry you, I assume you married without me, then tell him I give my blessing now, though it comes late. I would like to meet him properly. Come visit when you can. Ingrid cried, reading it. They visited Germany that summer. Her father shook Jim's hand and apologized. Jim accepted graciously. They had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. Ingrid taught them German, told them stories of Hamburg, kept the culture alive while embracing their American identity. They grew up knowing they came from 2 worlds that had once been enemies but were now family. In 1985, on their 39th wedding anniversary, a reporter interviewed them for a story about post-war marriages. Ingrid, now 62, with gray hair and laugh lines, reflected on their journey. People ask if I felt like a traitor, she said. The truth is I did at first. Loving someone from the nation that defeated yours feels like betrayal. But Jim showed me that love doesn't have nationality. Kindness doesn't have borders. And sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is choose your own path, even when everyone says it's wrong. Jim, sitting beside her, added, "The war made us enemies, but it also put us in the same place at the same time. Sometimes I think that's what healing looks like, not forgetting what happened, but building something new from the broken pieces." Ingrid took his hand. "I chose love over loyalty to a dead regime, and I'd make that choice again. Every time." And so the soap and the hot showers became more than survival. They became the beginning of something neither Ingrid nor Jim could have predicted. For those German women who arrived at Camp Como expecting cruelty and found humanity instead, the greatest shock wasn't captivity. It was discovering that the enemy had faces, stories, and hearts. For Ingrid, that discovery led to love. Not the kind of love that propaganda films portrayed, simple and pure and uncomplicated, but real love, messy and difficult and requiring courage. The kind that asked her to choose between past and future, between loyalty to what was gone and hope for what might be. The ring Jim gave her became a symbol of that choice. Not a betrayal of Germany, but a rejection of hatred. Not a surrender to the enemy, but an embrace of humanity over nationality. As Ingrid told her children years later when they asked about the war, kindness is harder to carry than cruelty. Cruelty you can hate and resist. But kindness? Kindness changes you. It breaks down walls you didn't know you'd built. Your father's kindness didn't conquer me. It freed me to see clearly for the first time. That is the story worth remembering. Not because it's simple or comfortable, but because it's true. Love doesn't wait for convenient times. Humanity doesn't pause for politics. And sometimes the most revolutionary act is choosing connection over division. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe. These hidden histories of courage, transformation, and love across impossible divides need to be told, because they remind us that even in war's darkest moments, human connection can still light the way forward. Thank you for watching, and remember, the best stories are the ones we almost forgot to tell.